Execution. 3.5, 4, 5, 5.5. Syncro, 5.5, 5.5, 5 across. Caitlin and Crystal, 105B, 2.4. Execution. 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Syncro, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Claire and Genevieve, 305C, 2.8. Execution. 6.5, 6, 7.5, 7. Synchro, 7, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 7. Sydney and Janie, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 5.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Syncro, 6, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Aaliyah and Johanna, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 4, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Syncro, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4. Page in London, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 4, 3.5, 6, 5.5. Synchro, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Summer and Allison, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 5, 5, 6.5, 6.5. Syncro, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5. Allison and Shanae, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 5, 4.5, 7.5, 7. Syncro. 6, 6.5, 6, 7, 7. Liv and Brianna, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 4, 5, 5.5, 6. Syncro. 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Alexandra and Sarah, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 5.5, 5, 6.5, 6.5. Syncro. 7, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Mackenzie and Samantha, 305C, 2.8. Execution. 3.5, 4.5, 3.5, 4. Syncro. 3.5, 4.5, 4 across. Jacqueline and Emily, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 3.5, 3, 6, 5.5. Syncro. 4, 4.5, 4, 5, 4. Jennifer and Catherine, 105B, 2.4. Execution. 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Syncro. 6, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Rachel and Abigail, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 4, 4, 6, 6. Syncro. 4, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Logan and Charlie, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 4, 4, 5.5, 5.5. Syncro, 5.5, 6, 3.5, 5, 4.5. Kara and Sarah, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 3.5, 4, 6.5, 5.5. Syncro, 4.5, 4.5, 5 across. Mia and Marissa, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 3.5, 4, 5.5, 4. Syncro, 4, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5. Allison and Carolina, 305B, 3.0. Execution, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Hold the scores, please. I need the execution scores one more time, please. 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Syncro, 5, 4, 5, 6, 5.5. Taylor and Lexi, 305C, 2.8. Execution, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3. Syncro, 3.5, 4.5, 3, 3, 3.5. Georgia and Abigail, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 3.5, 2, 4.5, 5. Syncro, 1/2, 1, 1/2, 1, 1. Jesse and Alexandra, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 4.5, 6.5, 7, 6. Synchro, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Maria and Brooke, 5152B, 3.0. Execution. 7, 7, 6.5, 6. Syncro. 6, 6.5, 5.5, across. Liv and Caitlin, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Syncro. 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Abigail and Catherine, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 2.5, 3, 2.5, 2. Syncro. 3, 2.5, 3, 3, 4. Maggie and Daria, 305C, 2.8. Execution. 5.5, 7, 7, 6.5. Syncro. 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Sophia and Taryn, 305C, 2.8. Execution. 6, 5, 4.5, 5. Syncro. 5.5, 6.5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Haley and Markey, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 6, 6, 7.5, 6.5. Syncro. 7, 7, 6, 7, 6.5. Grace and Nikki, 305C, 2.8. Execution. 6.5, 5, 6, 6. Syncro. 6, 5, 6.5, 6, 5.5. Allison and Adrian, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Syncro. 5, 5.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Caitlin and Jocelyn, 105B, 2.4. Execution. 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Synchro. 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Bridget and Maisie, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 7, 7.5, 8, 7. Synchro. 7.5, 8.5, 7.5 across. Alexandra and Crystal, 205C, 2.8. Execution. 3.5, 3.5, 5, 4.5. Synchro. 4, 4, 4, 5, 4. Carolina and Ann, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 5, 6.5, 7, 7. Synchro. 7.5, 7.5, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Allie and Kara, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Synchro. 4.5, 4.5, 4, 5, 4.5. Marky and Brianna, 405C, 2.7. Execution. 6.5, 5.5, 7, 6. Synchro. 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 6.5. Beginning our sixth and final round for this event on the 5 meter, Kendall and Jonathan, 303C, 2.1. Execution. 6.5, 6, 6, 5. Synchro. 6, 6, 5 across. On 10 meter, Benjamin and Maxwell, 52-53B, 3.2. Execution, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Syncro, 7.5, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5, 7.5. On 5 meter, Lyle and Noah, 405C, 3.1. Execution, 6, 5, 6, 6. Syncro, 6, 6.5, 6, 6, 6.5. On 7 meter, Noah and Jonathan, 52-33D, 2.4. Execution, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5. Syncro, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. On 7 meter, Caleb and Jonathan, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Syncro, 6, 7, 5.5, 6, 5.5. On 7 meter, Duncan and Devon, 52-33D, 2.4. Execution, 5, 5, 6.5, 6. Syncro, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5. On 7 meter, Casey and Tristan, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 4, 3.5, 6, 6. Syncro, 5, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. On 10 meter, Jacob and Keegan, 51-52B, 2.9. Execution, 4.5, 5, 7, 6. Syncro, 6, 5.5, 7, 6.5, 7. On 5 meter, William and Tom, 203B, 2.3. Execution, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Syncro, 5, 5, 4, 6, 5. On 5 meter, Kendall and Noah, 5231D, 2.1. Execution, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Syncro, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5. On 7 meter, Logan and Campbell, 5235D, 2.8. Execution, 3, 4, 5.5, 5.5. Syncro, 5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5. Onto our 3 meter boards, Reagan and Emma, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 4, 4, 4.5, 5. Syncro, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5. Caitlin and Crystal, 5235D, 2.8. Execution, 4, 4, 6, 6. Syncro, 5, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5. Claire and Genevieve, 5233D, 2.4. Execution, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Syncro, 6.5, 7, 6.5 across. Sydney and Janie, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 3, 3, 6, 6. Syncro, 4, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 5. Aaliyah and Johanna, 5235D, 2.8. Execution, 6.5, 5, 6, 6. Syncro, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 7, 6. Page and London, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 3, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. Syncro, 4.5, 5, 4, 5, 4.5. Summer and Allison, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 4, 3.5, 5, 4.5. Syncro, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Allison and Shanae, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5. Syncro, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Liv and Brianna, 105B, 2.4. Execution, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Syncro, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Alexandra and Sarah, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 4, 4, 7, 6. Syncro, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Mackenzie and Samantha, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 4, 4, 5.5, 6. Syncro, 5, 4.5, 5 across. Jacqueline and Emily, 105B, 2.4. Execution, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5. Syncro, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 3, 3.5. Jennifer and Catherine, 5235D, 2.8. Execution, 4.5, 5, 6.5, 5.5. Syncro, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Rachel and Abigail, 5134D, 2.5. Execution, 3.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4.5. Syncro, 3.5, 3.5, 3, 4.5, 4. Logan and Charlie, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 6, 6.5, 7.5, 7. Synchro, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7. Kara and Sarah, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 4.5, 4.5, 6, 6.5. Syncro, 6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.5. Mia and Marissa, 5233D, 2.4. Execution, 6, 6, 6.5, 5, 5. Syncro, 4.5, 5, 3.5, 3, 3. Allison and Carolina, 5152B, 3.0. Hold the boards. Okay, we're going to let Mia and Marissa are going to repeat that dive. So that's Mia and Marissa, 5233D, 2.4. Execution, 7, 6, 6.5, 6. Syncro, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Now we have Allison and Carolina, 5152B, 3.0. Execution, 7, 7.5, 8, 7.5. Syncro, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8. Taylor and Lexi, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 6, 5.5, 4, 4.5. Syncro, 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4. Georgia and Abigail, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 3.5, 3.5, 5.5, 5.5. Syncro, 4.5, 3.5, 4, 5, 4.5. Jesse and Alexandra, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 2, 3.5, 6.5, 6.5. Syncro, 3.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 4. Maria and Brooke, 305B, 3.0. Execution, 5, 6, 6, 6. Syncro, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Liv and Caitlin, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Syncro, 5.5, 6, 5, 6, 5.5. Abigail and Catherine, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 3.5, 3, 3.5, 3. Syncro, 3, 3, 2.5, 4, 3.5. Maggie and Daria, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 4.5, 5, 7, 6.5. Syncro, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Sophia and Taryn, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 4.5, 4.5, 6, 6. Syncro, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Haley and Markey, 5134D, 2.5. Execution, 5, 5, 7, 7. Syncro, 6.5, 6, 6, 7, 6. Grace and Nikki, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 6.5, 6, 4.5, 5. Synchro, 5.5, 6.5, 5, 5.5, 6. Allison and Adrian, 105B, 2.4. Execution, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Syncro, 7, 6, 7 across. Caitlin and Jocelyn, 305C, 2.8. Execution, 4, 4, 4.5, 4. Syncro, 4, 4.5, 4, 4, 3.5. Bridget and Maisie, 5152B, 3.0. Execution, 3.5, 4, 4, 4. Syncro, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5. Alexandra and Crystal, 405C, 2.7. Execution, 4.5, 3.5, 5.5, 5.5. Syncro, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5, 5. Carolina and Ann, 5235D, 2.8. Execution, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5. Syncro, 7.5, 7, 7.5 across. Allie and Kara, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 3.5, 4, 1.5, 1.5. Syncro, 2.5, 1, 2.5, 1, 2.5. Marky and Brianna, 205C, 2.8. Execution, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Syncro, 4, 4, 3, 3.5, 4. That concludes this event for this morning. Thank you, judges, and thank you, spectators, for supporting our athletes.